As I sat in a near-empty cinema watching The Dial of Destiny, disconsolate and squirming in the gloom, like a child whose sleep is disturbed by the clamorous laughter, clinking glasses and burble of a grown-up party in the house, I took the measure of my feelings and realized that I, and probably you too, are just done, and there's nothing left for Hollywood to ruin. The woeful opening weekend box office figures came in for Dial of Destiny, barely $60 million domestically out of a $300 million budget. In The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a restaurant called Millerway's offers its guests spectacular views of the end of the universe. You and I, most dear of all my video watchers, are poised in a kind of digital equivalent, beholding the spectacle of Hollywood in its entropic dispersal and drift. You and I, most serendipitous scroller, are like Spock and Captain Kirk, clinging to one another as the Genesis planet that is Hollywood enters its last stage of degeneration and collapses around us. You, most cherished of all YouTube video consumers, are with me, traversing a figurative fantasia in the never-ending story, as the lack of imagination and creativity in Hollywood culminates with it being swept away into the disintegrated negative space of a metaphorical nothing. But in our reality, dear connoisseur of content, there is no Falcor to swoop down and rescue us, or communicator into which we can shout Choi Chu in a ruse to get us beamed up. Because finally, here, at the end of all things, there's nothing left for Hollywood to fuck up. I know the game is up, but if I were able to hold a little plenary session at Disney, or Amazon Studios, a kind of performance review or symposium, a presentation to a gathered throng of modern screenwriters, a banal, androgynous, sexually ambiguous collective with their laptops, writing pads, and pencils, I would offer up a few humble ideas for their consideration, to try and account for the now regular succession of bombs, flops, turkeys, and stinkers they are producing, and suggest some changes. Firstly, we want more women on screen in compelling and leading roles in tentpole films. But Girls Do It Better remakes are lame, contrived, indulgent, divisive, and are born out of a prissy laziness, using the endearing charm and name recognition of a legacy character and throwing in a mundane or poorly developed female character to piggyback off the goodwill for the franchise as a whole. It's been done to death, it's a busted flush, it's all played out, the jig is up, the cupboard is bare. The troubled growth of Luke Skywalker from solemn and callow farm boy to fully realized mystic of an ancient order formed a perfect cinematic arc.
Hey, it's Ray, gonna save the fucking day 'cause I slay.
The growth of Aragorn from diffident outsider through peril and challenges and poignant affairs of the heart to a fully realized benevolent king was a masterclass in characterization. Ghost fucking Busters, Peter Pan and Wendy, Doctor Who, The Terminator, even Scooby-Doo for God's sake, the whole gender substitution shortcut to empowerment has been flogged to death. Secondly, hypothetical gathering of screenwriters for this figurative Google Docs presentation. Yes, there is still a dearth of women as directors and showrunners in Hollywood. But can we take a quick look at who these male showrunners are? Are they 80s canon films style cigar-chomping, suspenders-wearing male chauvinists, slapping asses and coercing naive young ladies onto the casting couch? And cackling lewdly over their typewriters, churning out sexist dialogue, their noses white with blow, the septums in tatters from snorting too many lines, pouring whiskey sodas from a silver drinks tray in the daytime? Let's consider these leering, beefy misogynists, shall we? Bastion of masculinity, Paul Feig. Testosterone junkie Ryan Johnson, jacked and rock-jawed Kevin Feige, icons of virility J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, staunch man's man David Lowery, and imposing alpha male Alex Kurtzman. Also, it has to be conceded that there isn't enough LGBT content on screen, and these modern screenwriters are well within their rights to boldly assert themselves and co-opt existing intellectual properties to try to mend that disparity moving forward. Well, I mean, there's the grounded and mature lesbian relationship in Andor, and the two blokes having a pash in the long grass in House of the Dragon, and the positive lesbian cop couple featured in Velma, and the idealized interracial lesbian couple in Lightyear, and the fantasy drama somewhat incongruous sapphic coupling in Willow, the gay teen 10 dress foregrounded and celebrated in Strange World, The 3-episode arc devoted to a fated lesbian romance in The Haunting of Bly Manor, the entire episode dedicated to a self-contained tender gay love story in The Last of Us, the revelation of Ellie's gayness in The Last of Us, the first non-binary character in a Pixar film in the form of a 600-degree walking torch, gay romantic comedy Bros, lovingly depicted gay married couple in Knock at the Cabin, Love, Simon, Young Royals, and Heartstopper. But apart from that, there's just nothing for gay people to appreciate or feel represented by in mainstream entertainment.
Oh, wow, Mr. Sarcasm.
Lastly, I would, in my guest speaker capacity, suggest to these screenwriters the one thing they would despise contending with most of all. The notion that, with much of their identity formulation deriving from a sense of grievance about being overlooked, underrepresented, contending with systemic bias, and an indifference to the types of stories they feel ought to be told, they themselves could have some massive blind spots when it comes to storytelling and successfully connecting with audiences. One is taking existing properties you had no part in dreaming up, no part in fostering, lovingly developing, going through hell and high water to get off the ground, going through periods of wild anxiety trying to create and world build out of nothing, and cultivating a faithful, ever-renewing and growing fan base of devotees for, and then fucking it up with identity politics-driven motivations, leaving it a spiritless pastiche sodden with fatuous, obtuse empowerment. And, in a wider sense, as we're witnessing now, eventually the studio you work for is going to run out of properties to reinvent. There's nothing left to deconstruct, to strip mine. If you're going to make tentpole movies that bring in the masses, you're going to have to start from scratch. And no, new Star Wars films with Rey again, and Boba Fett or The Mandalorian or whatever, isn't going to make much money. The Rings of Power only had a 37% completion rate, meaning that far less than half of its viewers even finished the series, which is an unprecedented disconnect and failure. Lastly, it has to be said, you guys don't really know how to write compelling male characters. In fact, you girls and beta male-ish, amenable and convivial but kind of pussy-ish guys in the writing room, it isn't even all that clear if you have any functional experience of interactions with centered masculine men with agency. And we're not talking conventional alpha male characters here. Not really. We're talking flawed, complicated, absorbing male characters with subdued forms of ironic expression, deliberation and timing, masculine drollery, wryness, inter-male scrutiny and masculine drives, preoccupations, fatalism, and tensions. Daniel Plainview from There Will Be Blood, Basie from Empire of the Sun, junkie intellectual Mark Renton from Trainspotting. You modern screenwriters can't write these kinds of characters anymore because you're lame and you're not very talented and you've grown up in a pussy-ish social milieu and you suck. Ersatz in art and culture means fake or imitation that can be used to fill a space that would contain culture. This is the age of ersatz entertainment. Because there's so little creativity in Hollywood, because so much modern culture is reproduction, rehashing, and reimagining, modern cinema has the uncanny feel of watching cosplay, except with the real people. I never imagined in my lifetime, let alone in the span of a month, I would see both Peter Pan and Indiana Jones getting punched out by strong female characters. I also never imagined that Hollywood could run out of things to wreck, be so out of touch with prevailing attitudes, or that it could lose so much money.